Hello, I'm Pat Van Patten, and I want to welcome you two into the 21st century. This show will explore our options, our responsibilities, and our expectations as we approach the 21st century. My co-host, Johnny Darren, will introduce our guest.
Talking with author and self-described living verb, Buckminster Fuller, and we'll explore that self-profile later on. But as Pat mentioned, we're looking ahead to the 21st century. What do we need to do to get ready for it? What preparations, based on where we have arrived at this particular point in time?
The question whether we're going to get there at all.
Well, assuming the positive.
I think it's typical of a man's misorientation and misconditioned reflexes to think about the 21st century as being something very close at hand. We're in an acceleration of human affairs. It's actually four-dimensional, going just like that, so that what's going on just in these few minutes while we're talking in world affairs is absolutely phenomenal. So to talk about the 21st century in many ways, I think, is called species. But we'll do our best to see what we can. I wrote something very recently. I actually like to read it, called Integrity. I don't know any. I had just been studying my world map, and you've seen. Let me have our world map.
This is the Dymaxion map, right?
And hold it up nice and vertically. This is the only map of the world where you can see the whole world at once, without any visible distortion of the relative shape or size of any of the parts, without any break in the continental contours. You have one world island and one world ocean. And it's absolutely faithful to look at. So I have made an enlargement of this, 67 feet long. You can put it down if you'd like now, sir. If you'd like to put it down. At the University of Colorado, that was something called World Affairs Conference, for their 25th year. And I've been carrying on something called World Game for 55 years. And I had my map enlarged for the World Affairs Conference. It was April the 1st, so a very short time ago, a month and a half ago. It was 67 feet long, and it filled the basketball court in the University of Colorado's new event stadium. And Walter Cronkite incidentally sent on his TV crew for what he calls Universe to make pictures of that great map. Otherwise, I had that map stretched out as you saw it there, but what do we call 2:1 scale. And it was the data of the United States Air Force World Jet Navigation charts. So you saw the whole world at once, stretched out 67 feet, and it had everything that a jet navigator would see from his altitudes. It had all the railroads, it had all the main highways, had even towns down to 5,000 people. So it's amazing. You can see the whole world at once, yet you can see your own town, and you can see all the highways from your town to other highways. So you had to go and actually get close to the map and take off your shoes and walk around in it to be able to see your own town. But there it was. You found there's the highway you're very familiar with. On this map, as I walked on it, my eyes were the height of 2,000 miles. I was up some of the great satellites are getting very important kind of pictures. The height of the moon at that scale was a 70-story building. We have many 70-story buildings nowadays. At that scale, the sun was 25 miles away. So we had it in Boulder, Colorado, and Denver was just 25 miles away. And from the hills in Boulder, you could see Denver. So you could really see the distance the sun would be in relation to the scale, yet you could see your own town. Suddenly we had an interrelationship with humanity with the cosmic orientation, and they were incredibly moved. With this map then, my 1 mile on it was 1/32 of an inch, and you can see that on a school ruler, 32nd of an inch. So that in any town that was 32nd of an inch showed up. Now, 32nd of an inch then, being a mile, Mount Everest, 6 miles, a little less than it. So we have 6 32nds of an inch. That's 3/16 of an inch. So 3/16 of an inch like that. That's the height of Mount Everest. So the other mountains were actually negligible. The deepest ocean was 3/16. There are not many of those very deep spots. The average ocean was only 1/32nd of an inch. So we've had the map is stretched out flat was actually correct. And what you would, as you were feeling about, that's the waviness of the paper took care of the highest mountains, the deepest ocean. So with this very true map and being able to feel yourself and seeing one world island, and that's all surrounded by the water, people were terribly, terribly excited. On that map then, began to find that there was 45,000 square inches of dry land, and there were 50,000 bombs, atomic bombs, waiting to be delivered. You could see on it the utter destruction of all humanity.
Right.
And this became so impressive to me. Realized I could really get people to understand and feel this extraordinary imminence, that I found myself writing this thing. A very large number of Earthians, possibly the majority, sense the increasing imminence of total extinction of humanity by the more than 50,000 poised for rocket delivery atomic bombs. Apparently no one of the 4.5 billion humans on our planet knows what to do about it, including the world's most powerful political leaders. Humans did not invent atoms. Humans discovered atoms together with some of the mathematically incisive laws governing their behaviors. In 1928, humans discovered the existence of a galaxy other than our own Milky Way. Since then, we've discovered 2 billion more galaxies, each averaging over 100 billion stars. Each star is a chain-reacting atomic energy plant. Humans did not invent the gravity cohering the macrocosm and microcosm of eternally regenerative universe. Humans did not invent humans, nor the boiling and freezing points of water. Humans are 60% water. Humans did not invent the 92 regenerative chemical elements. Humans did not invent the planet Earth with its unique biological life-supporting and protecting conditions. Humans did not invent the radiation received from our atomic energy generator, the sun, around which we designedly orbit at a distance of 92 million miles. The further away from its source, the less intense the radiation. With all the space of the universe to work with, nature found 92 million miles to be the minimum safe remoteness of biological protoplasm from atomic radiation generators. Humans did not invent the vast distance-spanning photosynthetic process by which the vegetation on our planet, Earth, can transceive the radiation from the 92 million miles away sun and transform it into the hydrocarbon molecules structuring and nurturing all life on planet Earth. Design is both subjective and objective, exclusively intellectual, mathematical conceptioning of orderliness of interrelationships. I'm going to read that once more. Design is both subjective and objective. You can see a design subjectively, or you can make a design objectively. But design is exclusively intellectual, mathematical conceptioning of orderliness of interrelationships. Did I follow that? You read that right? Since all the cosmic scale inventing and designing is accomplishable only by intellect, and is not the intellect of humans, is obviously that of the eternal intellectual integrity we call God. All living creatures, including humans, have always been designed to be born unclothed, utterly inexperienced, ergo absolutely ignorant, driven by hunger, thirst, respiratory requirements, curiosity, or instincts such as the reproductive urge. Creatures are forced to take speculative initiatives or to follow the herd. Ecological life is designed to learn only by trial and error. Common to all creatures' experience is a cumulative inventory of only by trial and error developed problem-solution reflexes. That's enough, too long. Unique only to human experience is the fact that problem-solving leads not only to alternate pastures, but sometimes to ever more complex, incisive, comprehensively significant, metaphysically generalized, and intellectually challenging problems. Humans have had to make trillions of mistakes to acquire the little we have yet have learned. The greatest mistake we have ever made is to assume that the supreme authority over life and universe is not God, but is either like organized religions or the humanly constituted and armed most powerful socio-economic systems, leaders. The human power structures would compound this primary error by ruling that no one should make mistakes and punishing those who do. This deprives humans of their only by trial and error learning. The power structure's forbiddance of error-making has fostered cover-upping, self-deceiving, egotism, false fronts, hypocrisy, legally enacted or decreed subterfuge, ethical codes, and economic rewarding of selfishness. Selfishness has in turn fostered both individual and national bluffing and vastness of armaments. Thus we've come to the greatest problems ever to confront humanity. What can the little individual human do about the supranational corporate power structures and their seemingly ungovernable capability to corrupt? A successful U.S. presidency campaign requires a minimum of $50 million. Senadorships, $20 million. Representatives, $2 million. Through big business advertising, placement, control of the most powerful media, money can and now has bought control of USA political systems once designed for democracy. Without God, the little individual human could do nothing. However, in addition to brains, God gave humans a mind. Human mind alone has been given access to some of the eternal laws governing physical and metaphysical universe, such as the laws of leverage, mechanical advantage, mathematics, chemistry, electricity, and laws governing gravitational or magnetic interattractiveness, which varies inversely in respect to the second power of distances intervening. Halve the distance and double the interattractiveness as it manifested by the progressive terminal acceleration of earthward traveling bodies, by the final snap together of inter-approach magnets. It is clearly evidence that God must have included humans in the design of the universe for very important reasons, else we would not have been given exclusive, objective use access to some of the eternal laws governing the physical and metaphysical universe. Employing those principles, humans have been able to illumine the nights of all humanity with electricity, to intercommunicate them with telephones, and integrate their daily lives, the remotest from one another, humans with the airplane. As a consequence of humans' minds solving problems with technology, within only the last three-quarters of a century of our multi-millions of years' presence on planet Earth, the technical design initiatives have succeeded in advancing the standard of living of the majority of humanity to a level unknown, undreamt of by any pre-20th century potentate. Within only the last century, humanity has grown from 95% illiterate to 65% literate. Preponderantly illiterate humanity needed literate leaders. Now preponderantly literate humanity is capable of self-instruction and self-determination in major degree. Clearly humanity is being evolutionarily ejected ever more swiftly from all the yesteryear's group womb of designedly permitted ignorance. Regarding the power structures as yet supported Scripture's legend of woman emanating from a man's rib, there is no sustaining experiential evidence. Humanity now knows that only women can conceive, gestate, and bear both male and female humans. Women are the continuum of human life. Like the continuous tension of gravity cohering space-islanded galaxies, stars, planets, and atoms, women are continuous. Men are discontinuous space islands. Men born forth only from the wombs of women have the function of activating women's reproductivity. The present evolutionary crisis of humans on planet Earth is that of a final examination for their continuance in the universe. It is not an examination of political, economic, or religious systems, but of the integrity of each and all individual humans, their responsible thinking, and unselfish response to the acceleration of evolution's ever more unprecedented events. These evolutionary events are the disconnective events, attendant upon the historic termination of all nations. We now have 160 national economic blood clots in our planetary production and distribution system. What is going on is a swift integration in a myriad of ways of all humanity, not into the United Nations, but into the United Space Planet people. always and only employing all the planet's physical and metaphysical resources only for all the people, this evolutionary trend of events will result in an almost immediately higher standard of living for all that's ever been experienced for anyone. The higher standard of living, the higher the standard of living, the lower the birth rate. The population stabilizing higher living standards will be accomplished through conversion of all the high technology now employed in weaponry production, redirected in living reproduction, blocked only by political party traditions and individually uncoped with obsoletely conditioned reflexes. For instances of our persistently misinformed conditioned reflexes, we have the failure popularly to recognize the now scientifically proven fact there are no different races or classes of humans, or failure to recognize technological obsolescence of the world around, politically assumed Marxist Darwin assumption of inherent planetary inadequacy of life support, ergo survival only of the fittest, or failure to ratify ERA, the Equal Rights for Women Amendment, by thus far in history most crossbred world people's democracy in the USA, or with ample food production for all Earthians, the tolerating of marketing systems which result in 75,000 humans dying of starvation each and every one of the 365 days of each year. Certainly, unchallenged persistence of a myriad of such misinformed brain reflexings of the masses will signal such lack of people's integrity as to call for the disqualification of humanity and its elimination by atomic holocaust. You may feel helpless about stopping the bomb. To you, the connection between Equal Rights Amendment and the atomic holocaust may at first seem remote. I'm confident that what I'm saying is true. The Holocaust can be prevented only by individual humans demonstrating uncompromising integrity in all matters, thus qualifying us for continuance in the semi-divine designing initiative bestowed upon us in the gift of our mind. That's a responsibility we have here today.
One would ask immediately, with talking about the acceleration factor, are we still in control as we speak now, or is it too late?
It's never too late. Never too late for the truth.
And how does each person take the initiative? It would have to be a different scale.
You don't have to take an initiative. Just really, as things happen to you, so simply say, what am I witnessing? What am I experiencing? Mm-hmm. What is the truth? What is its significance? Certainly, all around the world, I've been around 48 times, and I meet with the audiences, large audiences. I've averaged in the last 25 years, about every 4 days, I have an audience with 1,000 people out there. I don't have the big audience that you have on the TV, but I do get on TV really quite often. So I've been meeting with the world for a long, long time. And I find there's a young world everywhere around the world. There's a young world of so-called old people, too, who are really realizing they're only interested in all humanity. They're not interested in nations anymore. That was fine when you were remote. You found a place where you could keep life going and you guarded yourself. Mm-hmm. But that's all that phase of humanity is through, of history and evolution. So that the big thing is, you don't have to go out and do something big, but just have the courage to really go along with the truth to know it. And one of the truths right now is that all humanity is against having those bombs. How can they get this to your political leaders who are operating on great power structures of this great corporation? You meet the presidents, the vice presidents of these great corporations, and find excellent human beings. But they're told by their lawyer that they're there not for altruistic purposes, but to make money for the stockholders. So they override the goodness in the humanity itself. I think acquiring credit is something very logical. Old Henry Ford was inspired by the need of the farmer to be able to get to the market and to get things back home to the market. And he was inspired to produce those automobiles and produce them for $500. And he found that a lot of people who thought that he had a good idea and they put up some money for it, but they weren't interested in making money with the money. And when they began to talk to them that way, he had to pay them something like $1 million to buy their shares, but he bought them all. So he could really be committed to producing something for humanity. That his credit grew because he was doing so well, and so he could then have more and more capital capability. But the money and the amount of it was purely incidental to producing a service. because he simply was more and more involved with the technology and the knowledge of humanity. His son didn't understand that, Edsel. And his son, his grandson, got over the money game again, how to make money for stockholders. So I find that this invention by humans of the phenomenon of corporation itself is not something that was ordained by God. It was not part of the universe. It was artificial. And all the great corporations were invented and ordained by very powerful people. The King of England in the 13-something went into enterprise with people building ships. They go out in Paris and do anything they can to make money with those ships. And the king then invented limited liability. If you put up your money to go into the venture together, you make a whole lot with your venture, or you may not. But the point is, you are not liable if somebody fell overboard to the family. If the corporation went bust, you were not liable for the bills. In other words, this limited liability was a game that really threw things very powerfully on the side of people already very powerful. And that's where the corporation came from. And we have then all these games of today where corporations are absorbing other corporations and got to enormous power, where you don't even know who owns them, and they're all supranational. And yet they, amongst these properties they own, are corporations that have manufacturing munitions and so forth. So the directors and the executive officers are told by the lawyers, you have to make money. So they're not, there's no heart in there at all. So the whole question, for instance, right now about armaments and this enormous, you're going to take away all the rights of little people themselves, the poor people, in order to have money to buy armaments, so those corporations can make big dividends. These are very immoral things that are going on. So when I say what you can do is to get yourself versed in such matters and be able to talk about it and talk about it clearly. Let's have no more nonsense.
Could you tell us what you think about the Falklands, the war that has started?
Yes. I'd like to again come back to my map and look at it for a minute. They have another one, but look where the Falklands are. Look where the Falklands are, almost to the Antarctic, what you call the Great Roaring Forties. I have the same piece of my map arranged, instead of having one world island, I have one world ocean. And this one world ocean is centered around the Antarctic. 71% of the Earth's surface is covered with water. Only 29% is the dry land. So we found that here's the equator. I want you to look where the equator is. Here, here, here. 90% of humanity live north of the equator. Of the remaining 10%, 5% live within 1,000 miles of the equator, very close to it. Here again, it'd be that equator going around here. And another 4% live within 2,000 miles of the equator, south of it, and only 1%, the final 1%, live within 3,000. The next, it's 6,000 miles from the equator to the Antarctic. So the whole, really, that part of the Earth is not occupied by humanity. Humanity is all up in the northern hemisphere. Well, humanity's here. Remember, here, I say the equator, everybody's living in here. So, if you were then God, that's a thought of intellectual integrity, you might very well puppet humanity into doing various things. And I would say that the Russians, going back to the Russian Revolution of 1917, immediately after the revolution, the people who were the great masses were the serfs on the great farms, the great estates. So the people took over the farms. They're going to have all the productivity of the farms. But they found they couldn't possibly get their goods to the market, for instance. They didn't have the Henry Ford thing. And so the people were starving. So they realized that if they're going to get anywhere, they had to go to a new world as in industrialization of the technology, have the railroads, and then make the steel and refrigeration, all the things necessary to get those foods to people. They had to go through great privation. They went through their 5-year plannings, the first 3 plannings. 18 million people died of starvation while they were getting there, so it arrived at a very great sacrifice.
Wow.
They hoped to be able then, after they assumed World War II to be imminent, they assumed that after World War II, they would be able to turn their productivity on their people, their industrial productivity, to give them standard of living such as they saw in the Western world. They assumed that World War II was going to occur because they said if they were their new industrialization, they would be able to then produce this high standard of living. They would then be defying the great assumption of the Western world of capitalism that socialism wouldn't work. But suddenly they could see that it would work and do that industrial. So there was then this war, World War II, and it was turned against the Russians, the great trickery of Hitler seeming to be their ally, getting all the way up into and then turning against them, and bombing all their factories and all their industrial productivity. So the Russians did survive. Then they assumed after World War II they would be able to turn their productivity and the people and everything would just be great. But they found that was not possible. They seemed to be, were called an ally of the United States, but the United States found they were so involved with production of machinery and war material things. They said, we can't carry on and declare dividends unless we keep on and get ready for World War III. So we got into the Cold War. And the Cold War then, with this détente, every time the Russians tried to get up to parity so they could bargain in some way, the United States introduced a new round of more and more of these atomic bombs. So Russians then said, something very important about these atomic bombs. Russia, as Khrushchev and Eisenhower, when they were the heads of their states, were told by their military, this is the first war that both sides lose. In the war of scimitars, so forth, it was a matter of the fast eye and muscle, alertness. But when it came to revolvers, whoever could squeeze a revolver first without jerking his hand, his bullet got away, and the other man's bullet never got away. So when we got to the bullet war, which we had a lot of, whoever shot first was the one that won. But with the new thing, with the atomic warhead and rocketry, because at the end of World War I, most we could fly was 15 miles. Suddenly came the rocket with World War II. And you could deliver at great distances, and then the Germans had the buzz bombs going out of England, but then they found much more. Werner von Braun, as part of the German scientists, knew how he really sent these rockets intercontinentally. So these rockets went 14,000 miles an hour, which seemed to be very fast. But the radar, which we suddenly had, worked at 700 million miles an hour. So rocket was going to take 20 minutes to go from with the atomic warhead from continent to continent, 20 minutes. But the radar went there in, I said, 700 million miles, split second. So here's a new war where we're going to have the Western good man and bad man. And the bad man fires, but it's going to take 20 minutes for the world to get the, so the good man said, I see you shot a bullet at me, I'm going to shoot mine. So they both get their bullets. They said, let's get out of the way here. They found there's a new kind of bullet to follow wherever they go. And so they have 20 minutes. He said, I hate you so much for doing what you did. I'm going to let you have my biological warfare, then I'm going to let you have all the chemical warfare. By the time both the bullets begin to hit, everybody loses. And so Eisenhower and Khrushchev were told by the military, this is the first war in history where both sides lose. So both of them said, we can't. So they had a meeting in Geneva about the peaceful uses of the atom they're going to start it. Hoping to divert the idea. But I want to understand that's what's going on now. So the Russians have assumed, every time they get to parity to discuss the idea of disarmament, the United States introduced a new round of bombs. So we got this enormous inventory of 50,000 bombs. So I then want you to understand that what the Russians then said, we're going to build our military strength for conventional war. There's the only possibility we'll ever get to having turn our production on the people. And that is to have a military show where we have superiority. So they got into conventional war. And I'm going to hold on to this one more. They got into the conventional, again, they had no Navy, so they started building Navy, which they said the Americans aren't interested, they're only interested in those bombs. So politicians in America were saying we're way ahead because we have the bombs. So they built the Navy. They now have a military strength, the Navy, 3 times the strength of the American Navy. They built up enormous divisions, all kinds of other armaments. So the whole question began to get to, they wanted to be able to, their pressure of their people seeing all the luxurious living in America, and people say, why don't you said socialism is going to work for us, but you're not doing it, and you're putting all the production into armaments. So they said, we can't keep control of this situation any longer if we don't exercise our military capability right now. We're certainly not going to wait until the Reaganites take 10 years to build up armaments to balance us. We're going to have to act. So I've been wondering what the Russians would really do, and how they would be able then to have a showdown and not have the atomic bombs get involved. So then we can look at the map. So we really find that here's the Falklands. And they're thousands of miles away from humanity. You could play a game here of military showdown, and nobody would have any really particular recourse to using the atomic bomb there. If they did, it still would just be down there. So I think that what happened is that the Russians then, more than 5 years ago, began to deal very powerfully. The Argentines began to get all their wheat and their much more than they're getting from us, and their meats and so forth. And they've been building up. And they're very strong in all the Americas, with all the Latin world. And they play that game very powerfully. So I think that they're puppeting, and you don't see them there because they're primarily submarines. They took the winter. They picked the winter when, if you had surface ships, all the ice, incredibly difficult. But they've had their great submarines. And the submarines, I'm sure, are down there. And they've been unquestionably helping the Argentines with other equipment. But anyway, I expect the Russians will probably win this war. And you say, isn't that terrible? And I say, no, it's not terrible. I noticed that, I remember when Ustinov, the actor, had a beautiful moving picture where he was head of a great nation, or rather small nation, and immediately challenged the United States to war, because you found that the loser was always the ones that won.
There's
Japan and Germany today. So
right, they were so built up.
If we happen to lose this particular war, we're not going to lose very much, because number one about it is that the kind of idea of revolution is what the Russians thought it was in 1917, because the majority of their people were serfs. They said the thing they was to get the land from all those great landowners who didn't really have any right to it, so they just got it by the sword and power, so we must take it over. And you find that same idea of land reforms in China, in Mexico, wherever there have been revolutions or people's revolutions, want to get the land. Then they get out of the land, they find it doesn't do anything, because it's again the same problem Henry Ford saw, how to get the things to market, how to get them to the people. Industrialization is a big story, and that's why Russia did have to get into the 5-year plans. Now, I see then that people then think about revolutions as revengefully pulling the top few fortunate down to lower. But what's going on is this technological revolution, which is if you give up all your technology going into armaments, you'll have it available to lift everybody to a higher standard of living than anyone's ever known. It can be done within 10 years.
Do you think that's possible, that the powers of the world will come together and do that?
I don't think powers of the world are going to come together. I think it's happening by what I said, by Russia taking the upper hand militarily and saying, we're going to have disarmament. Because they'll insist on everybody giving up. They'll keep a little more than the others, always have an upper hand, while they then turn their productivity on the people. Otherwise, they can't hold together. That's what Poland's all about and so forth.
There are a lot who would say, now you're advocating socialism. How do you remain apolitical in that, so that you qualify it as a humanitarian view rather than a political view?
Try to understand what God is doing. Try to look at it evolutionarily. I'm sure that when we now, I spoke about discovering 2 billion more galaxies and 100 billion stars each. I'm sure those people, if there are any people out there, they're not interested in Republicans and Democrats in a little planet called Earth and the solar system. So that I think it's absolute nonsense. I'm giving you my feeling about politics, simply power structure all the time. Who gets the power? And I'm not interested in power structure. I'm interested in total humanity. And because I'm interested only in total humanity, I don't have good and bad people, because I told you we learn to learn by trial and error. So when people make a mistake, I don't say they're wrong. In fact, you've never learned anything. If I know anything and you ask me questions, because I've really made more mistakes than anybody I know, and I've been really, the one discipline I have is to really be sure, I say this integrity, don't kid yourself. You made a mistake. Your judgment is wrong. say so clearly and uncover what really is, because you're pretending to something, pretending yourself. So I live really very much on the truth, and I have anything to say to you that comes out from that which I'm then saying. If all humanity doesn't begin to behave in that kind of way, going along with the truth, whatever it may be, we're not going to get there.
Many of the established religions and the educational institutions seem to stifle creative thinking in that they demand some degree of blind faith, and that they mandate no mistakes if not possible. So this is contradictory to what you're advocating. How does one overcome that? How does somebody begin to adjust their life to think for themselves rather than following what has been predetermined?
I wrote a book called Synergetics, Mathematics of Nature, and I put at the beginning of it, dare to be naive. If you see something that looks different from what they taught you at school, pay attention to it. I'd like to get into, for instance, the fact that I was asked in 1953 to give the monthly discourse to the members of the faculty club at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And when I came, there were about 200 distinguished scientists there. I said, would anybody in this room who doesn't see the sun going down in the evening, please show their hands? There were no hands. I said, I'm absolutely shocked to be dealing with such ignorant people. You've known for 500 years the sun is not going down. The earth is revolving to obscure the sun. And you call yourself scientists, and you call yourself teachers and professors, and you tell your own child, look down, the sun going down. Yeah. So that we consider it practical to misinform or to keep on with the misinformation seems to me very shocking. The words up and down have no meaning. And I'm sure every audience I've ever come to is still linked with it. And where do we get to those words? We got it from the time when the great Roman Empire was building up. After Alexander the Great, the next big power structure moved to the little bit to the west, from Greece to Italy. And the great Roman Empire found that the people were not being very impressed by their military power. They found then that the people life was so miserable. The people were interested in the priests and the religion about getting into the next world where you're going to have things great, that this world was simply a trial. So we have the Roman emperors putting people in the Colosseum with the lions. They said, Mr. Pope, you're going to hell, we're going to heaven. So let the lions come on. We get the words up and down because though there was four really very great Greek scientists in the 400 BC to 200 BC who really discovered quite clearly that we were in the solar system. They were able to describe it. We got Eratosthenes in 200 BC measuring the circumference of the Earth to a very fine degree. In 200 BC there were globes. The Roman emperors finding that people not being impressed and kowtowing to them disliked this very much, so they destroyed the great library at Alexandria with information like that. And they said, listen, people, we have an appointment through the Son of God. We have it perfectly set up that we're the authorities on your getting into heaven. And you've got to pay attention to them. And so they were able to amalgamate the military power and the religious power. And they said, obviously, we can't have a solar system because we're the planet. We're the head of the universe. We're representing God here. And so we have a nice flat Earth going to infinity out here. And the sun is going around us. And if we're on a flat Earth going to infinity, then all the perpendiculars to it are parallel to each other. Each tree is parallel to the other tree. All the people standing there, obviously, parallel to each other. So if you have only perpendicular and parallel, you have only two directions. You go up and down. And they said, we control the up traffic, and you have to confess this every day, or you're going down. So they controlled ascension into heaven. So the idea of ascent into heaven, the heaven is up, was very powerful in people. But if you find we're on the sphere, then you find each of the perpendiculars, tree, go over here, and keep pointing. None of them are parallel to each other. Right. They're diverging. So the words up and down are wrong. I heard the President of the United States congratulate the astronauts on getting up to the moon. And they spoke to it on the TV when they did it, of being up here on the moon. And they were in the direction of my feet when they said it. We find they only got to the moon by virtue of the instruments that were focused on the sun and other stars and angulation and control. When the world's mathematicians tried to calculate sending the first of our rocketry into the moon. They missed it by some over 100,000 miles. In other words, our mathematical capability is very, very awry, and we only got there by, say, on light-controlled instruments focused on the sun and other stars. Now, what do we do? The first question I say, what words should I use? And the words are in and out. The aviators learned long ago they were not going up and down. They're going to come in for a landing, and they go out. So in is always point-toable. You can go into the moon, go into the sun. Out is any direction. You go in to go out on the other side. Out is all directions, and in is specific. Really quite different, yeah. Now, you get in electronics and begin to tune in. You tune in the program, okay? And then or you tune it out. But the fact that it isn't tuned in doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
This gives you an entirely new idea about life. For instance, we used to have in the old up and down world, you had things and you had space. So we either in the space we run into the thing. Now we have what you call tuned in and tuned out. And because it's not tuned in doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm going to get quite a different idea about life and death here.
I wanted to ask you what you felt about it.
That, yeah. So that I find the minute you take the trouble to say, I'm going instairs and outstairs, though it sounds rather awkward for a few days, you begin to just get into the world as it really is, where we have discovered these invisible electromagnetic waves.
Well, when you say death, then what, you don't mean out of here?
I mean you're not tuned in.
You're not tuned in.
Because how do we live? No human being has ever seen outside himself. You see little children going around touching everything. Say, why does that child have to touch things? All of our seeing is in our imagination inside our brain. But they get information through the optical system that something's out there, so they go around touching it. By the time you get to be your age, you now assume that you do see it outside. So you think you see me sitting over here. You're not seeing me over here. You're seeing me in your brain. Very important to realize we only live and exist in our brains here. So whatever living is, there's somebody else other than yourself who knows of you. Life begins with awareness, and no otherness, there's no awareness. So our awareness of the otherness is where we live then. You begin to meet me here today, I meet you. You're from now on, if I remember your name, I'm remembering you. Very often at age 87 that I am, I write to old friends. I get a letter back from their wife saying, you didn't know it, but Frank died. I write back and I said, obviously we live in here, and Frank was absolutely alive, or I wouldn't have written to him. He's still alive as far as I'm concerned. And as long as anybody remembers you, you're going to be alive, I assure you. That's where you live. Very important to realize that we're not the physical flesh. There was something humanity got up as a mental game called, what do you call, the things were animate or inanimate. They said the inanimate cold metal here and the animate warm soft flesh. And so that used to be sort of a major question, but both were physical. So within the world of physical, we got gradually into something called botany and biology. We got into chemistries and so forth, but we said quite clearly the biology was all animate. The nice warm people, or the nice kind of soft
flowers, yeah,
stems of the daisy or whatever it might be. So then not so long ago, we got to get into something called genetics, and learning how then to develop special corn to grow and so forth. We got into genetics. Then later on, we got into chromosomes, and began to have enormous amount of research work being done by scientists on fruit flies, because they regenerated very rapidly. They hoped they could tell from generation to generation what some of the genetic controls, some of the chromosomes were made of blue eyes, whatever it might be. Then they discovered that the tobacco mosaic virus regenerated much more rapidly than the fruit fly. So this brought about our going into the virology began there. And within the world of the virology, we began to then discover that DNA, RNA, angular design controls. And then those scientists in that world, there were no virologists a century ago. This is a completely new world. And it consists of physicists and mathematicians and biologists and geneticists and so forth. They're also busy and excited with it. None of them have been looking at what the physical qualities are, because you can say everything about DNA and RNA can be called crystallography. Everything about you today, physically, you are entirely atoms, and the atoms are completely inanimate. So what is inanimate is getting clearer and clearer, but what is animate is getting less and less clear, but because it started with biology, which was considered to be animate, it's been confusing the whole thing. We now know that young medical scientists have, time and again, when somebody was dying, they've been perfectly willing to have their bed on a scale, and they just thought at first that they was losing some weight. It turned out to be some actually identifiable water or some air in the lungs. So today we know that whatever life is doesn't weigh anything. In other words, it
weighs nothing.
It is absolutely. So early in the century, our physicists said that everything that is physical is energy. Energy is associative with matter or dissociative with radiation, but anything that's physical will move a needle, either electromagnetically or gravitationally. So whatever life is, it doesn't move any needles. In other words, what was not physical was metaphysical. So whatever we are is quite clearly metaphysical. At 87, I've now eaten, drunk, and breathed in over 350 tons of food, air, and water, which became temporarily my skin, my hair, brushed off. There was a time when I took off 70 pounds. I said, "Who's that? Here I am." I'm obviously not what it took. I'm not the flesh.
No.
So I'd like to get, we're going to have to straighten ourselves out on this very, very greatly. But whatever we are, it's really absolutely pure principle. And very beautifully expressible principles.
Do we regenerate then after we rid ourselves of the body? Is there a life after death as you see it? Not the conventional concept, but do you see it?
I can see that it's in the record. We've been putting in new hearts. I just got new himpus. It works great. And we put in new hearts, you can put anything. So inasmuch as we are not the physical, we can substitute the physical.
Right, but in your...
And if it seems to, I say, we're here in the universe for some very important reason. We've not been given minds. And we're at this point of final examination of whether we're qualified to carry on in that kind of a world where we can substitute the physical. We're not the physical. Where the metaphysical can decide whether it's a good piece of equipment. We're here for information gathering, local problem solving, and support of the integrity of an eternally regenerative universe. We're here for this big thing, so that I say that I feel very, very strongly about understanding principles. There were many times I've been told by scholars that if I ever met a certain professor at Yale, he would be able to blow my theories to smithereens. I finally was appointed to Yale and for a short term, and many of the students asked me to meet with this professor, and they asked me to meet with him on the TV. Luckily, they were going to make just a tape recording of it in advance. So I did meet with him at the TV station, and they sat us down opposite sides of a very powerful big wooden table. This professor, when they said it's time to go, he pounded the table like I said, "Don't tell me this table isn't solid." And I said, "How can you see me over here and challenge me in that kind of way? You got glasses. How can you see me through those solid glasses?"
Good point.
The point is that
that's a good point.
This is a group of atoms. It's a complex of atoms, and if you want to, you can have a airplane propeller blade, and you have the propeller going around so fast you can't see it.
Right.
But if you take a machine gun and time it mechanically with the propeller, you can shoot through between the blades.
Which is what they did in World War I.
It's a matter of time, yeah. So we have then, if I had a number of these propeller blades, and then I see the light then is going through, and it's going through 186,000 miles a second. Moves so fast that it doesn't get hit. But then we make it a little thicker, so it just tips it a little bit and changes the angle. That's how you make correction in your glasses. Anyway, we're seeing in pure principle. This is when I talk to at high frequency is simply pure principle.
Do you talk to theologians about the metaphysical and find that they don't agree with that because they cling to traditional concepts?
I don't really have any time, spending any time having sort of debates with people like that. I try to discover what I am experiencing, and I put it down on paper, and it must be experiential, and that's the way I operate.
I still don't quite understand. Do you feel that when you die, for instance, do you have any concept of what might happen to each person's soul?
I don't ever kid myself. I don't know, and you don't know.
No.
But I'm really fascinated with the fact that if I'm weightless, and it's not physical, so I'm just not locally present. But whatever I've been able to use my mind for that works, that will probably be better in various kind of ways. May I have the 10 segway structure? I want you to see something with me in pure principle. When I got into how we could develop environment controls and doing more with less for humanity, so that sometimes you might do so much so little you could take care of everybody, I got into realizing that all of our structuring, all of engineering is predicated on having marble blocks on marble blocks and stone to stone, compression to compression. We didn't get into tension of steel until 1851. Then we got our Brooklyn Bridge in 1883. Anyway, I saw that the Earth doesn't touch the moon, and doesn't touch the sun, that the electron is as remote from the nucleus as is the Earth from the moon, in respective diameters. I said, nothing in the universe touches anything else. And all of our building is in terms of such touching, and assuming something called solids, when physics found there were no solids. So I said, can I discover how humanity can use its principles of holding things together? Because that's what Kepler discovered, was these planets were holding together, and with the sun and millions of miles apart. And they're holding together, there's something invisible, tension. So I realized that when we made the wire wheel, we did connect the rim with the hub just in tension. It took a minimum of 12 spokes to do it. So I said, I think, can I get into omni, instead of just being in a plane like a wheel, can I get it omnidirectional? So this is what I have here. This is if you get rid of that water, it'd be very, very good.
Sure.
I'm going to just drop this. I like to I mean, let's see, this is like a basketball. It just bounces.
Oh, yeah.
Now, it distributes all its loads. You're seeing a lot of sticks, and the sticks, no stick touches another. The sticks are like the bricks. They're held together simply by what you call a Dacron thread, which we use for cleaning our teeth. But no thread is slack. Everything is all pulling. So when I drop it like that, it distributes the loads through the whole thing. It's like a basketball. It's exactly like a basketball. Put air into a basketball, pump it in, and it gets hotter and hotter. It gets a little hot. But what the molecules of atmosphere you're putting in of air do not go to the center and explode outwardly like that and be vibrating like that. What they do is go in and go caroming around. They're trying to get out, so they hit the skin here and then keep bouncing around. In engineering, we have something called every action has a reaction. I want you to think of two swimmers getting into a long, big swimming tank. They start at opposite ends. They get to the middle of the tank. They double up their knees, put their feet against each other, and shove off from each other. They get the same shove off they would from a wall. So each one of these is a molecule of gas, two of them, shoving in opposite directions. One goes this way, and then they go caroming around, hitting the skin, pushing the skin out. And the skin is in tension, but they're trying to go straight. But they're not going in and out like that, going around, cascading around, or rather, caroming around. So now you begin to see what you're looking at. Each one of these is simply a model of the molecules of gas going in the two directions, hitting the skin. So the skin is trying to bring them in, and they're trying to get out. So I found that, yes, sure enough, now I have a way of enclosing space, which there's no limit of tension. There's no limit of distance. Like there's no limit of distance of the pull between the different atoms. For instance, we have one of our planets is 1 billion miles away from the sun, still being held. Otherwise, tension could be absolutely unlimited. But once I found I could do that, I now can enclose any amount of space with unlimited space. Kind of held doing it entirely in tension. And compression, very, very, very limited. So this became the essence of the geodesic domes. There are over 300,000 around the world now. They do so much with so little. The one we have over the exact south pole of our planet, by the way, on the exact south pole, at the south pole of our planet in the Antarctic, there's a lake a mile deep frozen. And so the scientists realized that borings are going to tell them a lot about biological life on that continent. So the scientists wanted that. So the United States Navy sent down one of our geodesic domes, 140 feet in diameter, and stainless steel and aluminum, and it's a beautiful thing. Went down one airplane, do so much with little, he was able to carry all the great, be actually buried in snow and still not be crushed. So I've learned then we can do so much with so little. The way of environment control and so forth. When I talk to you about it is feasible to take care of all humanity, I now know what I'm talking about. We have, when I was born, reality was everything you could see, smell, touch, and hear. And the year I was born, they discovered the X-ray. I couldn't see it. The year that I was born, Marconi discovered theoretical wireless. You couldn't see wires. And when I was 3, electrons discovered. We were entering an era of new reality, where there's no question about the reality of that electron, but you couldn't see it. So going from the visible to the invisible. And this is one of the reasons why society today is really at quite a loss about the things that I talked about, because 99.999% of everything's going to affect our lives tomorrow is being conducted in realms of reality, electromagnetic spectrum, where human senses cannot reach. We have to reach it by instruments, by the microscope or the telescope, whatever it may be. And so I see that 1970, when I'm going to get into environment controls like this, and I've kept track of the continual increase in tensile strengths of materials. For instance, wood, about 10,000 pounds of square inch tensile strength. Masonry joint, only 50 pounds. Production steel got to 50,000 pounds of square inch tensile strength. Brooklyn Bridge was built with the steel, went up to 70,000. World War I, we got into aircraft, chrome aluminum steel was called, and we got up to 110,000, twice the strength of mild steel for the same weight. When McCready flew, rather a young man, pedaled his little plane over across the
Gossamer
Albatross, across the British Channel. No newspaper said anything about the fact it was made out of so strong with so little weight that it was 95 feet wingspan. 95 feet is very big, and yet it weighed only 45 pounds. You could hold it in one hand. Thank you. And this was then because it consisted of carbon fiber, which has 600,000 pounds of square inch tensile strength against mild steel of 50. So this was doing, we began to do so much with so little. In 1970, in the world of invisibility, which I've been keeping track of for 50 years, all the increase of capabilities, 1970 we crossed the threshold when for the first time it was absolutely clear that in a 10-year design revolution we could have all humanity living high standard living I've ever known. This comes at just the time when we get to the point where now we get this imminent disarmament. If we do that, then take all those metals in disarmament, and within 10 years we'd have everybody living, actually standard living, can't even be bought by a billionaire today. Others we'll have 5 billion billionaires. It's a very different game from socialism, isn't it?
But if I understand you right, it all rests on personal integrity.
Everything rests on integrity. Loving the truth.
How do we educate each other to initiate that within each one of us?
Just glorying in your own personal experience of the times you caught yourself where you thought something was true, or somebody asked you to believe something. I had a lovely darling, 2 grandmothers, like others do, but one of them said, "Darling, you know how much I love you. You're only 4 years of age, but I'm absolutely convinced that 2,000 years ago, a virgin gave birth to a child. And this child then is very big, coming from a virgin, very special, and somebody called Christ, said, because you know how much I love you, how much I believe it." And I loved it so much, of course I believed it. And so what we have to do is to be able to overcome the fact that darling grandmother's one, but you have to give it if it's illogical. You know, that thing I read to you, the idea that women came from man's rib. Nothing could be more preposterous, and yet that's in the scriptures, that's in the Bible, that's all the religions teaching it.
Right.
How do we communicate beyond religions, beyond language barriers? And we have about 45 seconds remaining. A quick... A little bit of direction from you, if you can.
As I say, there's a very deep knowledge always whether that's the truth or not. As far as our experience goes, sometimes our experience has been inadequate. Then our experience teaches something else. They had to cast off the old one and go with the new.